spoon. But now she's sunset blowing wonders.
You turned on the Beatles. Okay, let's take a look at were these the good old days? I think I'm just going to read them and we'll see what we can do. I'll keep my eye on the clock here. Time. Okay, 3:29. Alright, were these the good old days? Part 1 by Jack Larkin. Back around 1800, city dwellers allowed pigs to roam freely through the streets. Visitors openly spit tobacco juice on the floors of government buildings and churches. And people bathed once a year. Once a year. Who were these people? They were our ancestors. Actually, it gets worse. Imagine having a doctor who thinks he can cure your fever by tying a bag of fingernail cuttings around the neck of an eel. And think about this. Students who misbehaved in school were often tied to a post and whipped. Now that I can understand. The piece that follows is adapted from the book, The Reshaping of Everyday Life, 1790 to 1840. Jack Larkin is the author. He is the chief historian of Old Sturbridge Village in Massachusetts, one of the oldest outdoor history museums in the United States. By reading this article and those on pages 10 to 15, you will learn about what your life might have been like had you been an American citizen in 1800. Prepare for some surprises. This is the real stuff. And while some of it may not be pleasant, we hope you will find it fascinating. Oh yes. So let's take a look. The United States was already a huge country in 1790. The nation extended 1,200 miles north to south, from Maine to Georgia. It was, said one writer, a vast continent, by far the greatest part of which is still in the state in which nature left it. Americans are mostly a rural people. According to the 1790 census, only 1 American in 20 lived in a place with a population above 2,500. Northern families lived close enough to their nearest neighbors to see the faint gleam of their candles at night. In the South and West, houses were spread more thinly. One Southerner settler recalled that people lived in little clearings detached from each other by intervening forests, through which footpaths, bridle paths, and narrow wagon rows obstructed with stumps wound their way. Cities were noisier, dirtier, and more unhealthy than rural communities, but also more exciting. New York was one of the largest cities with 33,000 residents. New York was a busy place, and New Yorkers had already acquired their own characteristic body language. It was a popular American saying that a New York merchant walks as if he had a good dinner before him and a bailiff behind him, like fast. Somebody's after him, and I need to get to that dinner. Dirt and more dirt. Early 19th century Americans lived in a world of dirt, insects, and powerful smells. Animal waste covered farmyards, and farmers wore manure-spattered boots and trousers everywhere. Men's and women's work clothing were stiff with dirt and dried sweat, and men's shirts were often stained with tobacco juice. Sounds really, cool. Cities, I was going to say something else, but cities were often far dirtier than farmyards. Horse manure thickly covered city streets, and few neighborhoods were free from the horrible odors of tanneries and slaughterhouses. Tanneries are where they make leather. There was so much garbage piled in the streets of New York City, it was thought that the actual surfaces of the streets had not been seen for decades. In most cities, hundreds, sometimes thousands of pigs roamed the streets eating garbage. They kept the streets cleaner than they otherwise might have been. One exception was Charleston, South Carolina. There, buzzards patrolled the streets. Ugh. Where's the bathroom? Many people in small towns and rural areas simply sought out a patch of woods. Others built outhouse privies, or necessary houses, as bathrooms. People did not want to go outside at night. A chamber pot became a fixture in almost every American household. Cleaning them was a part of every housewife's daily routine. How pleasant. Farm families often dumped the pots out of the nearest door or window. In cities, that practice sometimes had horrible results. Noted one observer about a certain Mr. Day. He had a bad practice of pouring out of the upper window his filthiness. One day came the discharge on a man and a wife going to a wedding, and her silk dress was fouled. Oh, what's a bath? Americans were not clean and decent by today's standards. It was virtually impossible for them to be. There was no hot and cold running water, and sinks for washing were often in unheated kitchens. One observer wrote that in northern states, each household member would be fortunate if he had not to break ice in order to wash his face and hands. Or more fortunate, if a little warm water was poured into his basin from a kettle swung over the kitchen fire. Those in the South and West enjoyed warmer climates. They could wash more easily in their kitchens or in water from the outside wells. Still, these were cold water basins, or sinks that were outdoors and in full view of others. That made it unthinkable to do more than wash your face or hands once a day. Most people washed without soap, reserving it for laundering their clothes. Instead, they relied on a brisk scrubbing with a coarse towel to scrub the dirt off their skins. Now that sounds attractive. Writing in 1846, Dr. Hapley reported that to wash the surface of the whole body in water daily had finally become a standard practice among the upper class. But, he added, many who pass for models of neatness and cleanliness do not perform this work half a dozen times, nay, once a year. Pleasant. Smoking and spitting. Everyone smokes and some chew in America, wrote Isaac Weld in 1795. In colonial times, most men smoked pipes. Then, in the 1790s, cigars or cigars were introduced from the Caribbean. They cost an expensive 3 cents apiece, so only prosperous men took them up. In 1830, it was nearly impossible to avoid tobacco chewers in American streets, stores, public transportation, and even private homes. The problem was not in the chewing, but in the spitting out of the tobacco juice, which could not be swallowed. Ugh. In all public places of America, wrote the English author Charles Dickens, men engaged in the awful practice of chewing and spitting. Every few minutes he observed men squirting a mouthful of saliva through the room. Ugh. Pots or spittoons were provided for the chewers, but men often ignored them. The floors of public buildings were filthy. The floor of the Virginia House of Burgesses, wrote one observer, was actually flooded with the horrible spitting. Even church floors were black with tobacco juice spat out by choir members. Oh, that's classy. Southerners used the most tobacco. Of course, tobacco farms, plantations. The farther we have come south, the more universal have we found that disgusting practice, was a typical observation. A tobacco habit was a danger to anything that happened to be nearby, even a woman's dress at a fashionable ball. One night, as I was walking upstairs, recalled one innocent victim, my partner began clearing his throat. This scared me. However, I said to myself, surely he will turn his head to the other side. The gentleman, however, had no such thought, but deliberately shot across me. I had not courage enough to examine whether the result landed on my dress, meaning like he right in front of her, like across her. Now there's a date. Don't believe that only men use tobacco. As the famous 19th century newspaper editor Horace Greeley recalled, it was often my duty to fill and light my mother's pipe. Yeah, it wasn't really that unusual. So, okay, checking my time. Farm life. When Daniel Drake and his sister Lizzie were growing up in Macelake, Kentucky, it was their job to tend to the younger children. Daniel wrote in his diary that he occasionally milked a cow, but that was mostly a job for Lizzie. It was considered too gallish for a boy to milk. When he was 8, Daniel learned to ride the horse to steady it when his father plowed. He planted corn seeds and spent endless hours weeding. He also chopped wood for the fireplace and hauled fence rails to the fields. When he was 11, Daniel was given a gun to scare pests away from the fields. 11. At 12, he held the plow and guided the horse. At 13, he was splitting rails and building fences himself. By 16, he was carrying a grown man's workload in the fields. Lizzie didn't leave such a detailed account of her life. A woman named Susan Blunt, however, left a clear description of her life as a girl. At 10, she was sent away for a week at a time to keep house for a family down the road. That included caring for 2 young girls and their aged grandmother. Each day she woke at 5 and walked a great distance to get water. She then spent her day cooking, cleaning, mending, and caring for the people in the house. After a week of work, she was awarded 15 cents. So, I guess the next time you complain about your allowance, that's 15 cents worth of work right there. So, I think we'll stop here. Maybe bring in another one. I'll wait and see how it goes, if I feel like making another video. Otherwise, I'll keep reading. Thank you.